The wail of the train whistles, the sound of the wheels and axles as they churn, and of course the steam are all woven into the fabric of the sights and sounds of Kings Island. Of course, we're talking about the Kings Island and Miami Valley Railroad. Hello, everybody. I'm Don Helbig alongside Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Awesome. Yeah, Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's what we care about. It's what we care about most. Don, speaking of things we care about most, let's talk about the train, your favorite thing on earth, except for your immediate family.
Yeah, it always has been one of my favorite rides at Kings Island. One of the first attractions that I rode there. I think for a lot of guests that go to the park, especially if you're really young, it's one of your first big rides. For my brother, it was one of his first big rides. But just remember how big and massive the Kings Island Miami Valley Railroad looked compared to the train ride that I loved at Cincinnati's Coney Island. So, right away, it was a ride that I connected with. Rode it every chance I got when I would visit the park every year. It was on that must-do list, and I couldn't just ride it once. I had to ride it a couple times because you had the green 19 and the blue number 12. I had to do both of them. I considered those, each a different experience for different reasons. They sounded a little different. They rode a little different. So I, would ride it oftentimes twice. Every visit in the 70s and then going into the 80s when I got a season pass. It was something I did every visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because by the time I started visiting Kings Island, I was big enough that I appreciated the train, but I wasn't stuck to the train. But I will tell you, my brother is 5 years younger, and he was too too big for the really little rides, but too small for like the little rides. Yeah, it was a time when they didn't really have that in between. When if you were 4 or 5 years old, there wasn't a whole lot to do. But he loved Thomas the Tank Engine, and by Thomas the Tank Engine, I'm talking about the show that was used to be associated with Shining Time Station, was a PBS show. So he made my dad ride the train over and over again. My dad didn't mind it because he hated rides, but they rode the train a ton. I remember thinking that it was so cool that I went to the water park when I was little. I thought that was so unique and so fun that you went off to this whole different world through the woods, and then you could see the water park because the water park was built about a year before my first ever visit to Kings Island. But
Yeah. Now, back in the day, though, it didn't do that. From 72 to 88, it was a full circle on that. So you did not stop for a water park until Waterworks opened in '89. But I talked about how big these trains looked. They were designed by Crown Metal
mhm,
Products out of Pennsylvania. When they were delivered to Kings Island in 1971, the locomotives were a lot larger than the park officials had been expecting. They're again numbered 12 and 19. They're designed around the 440 American style General engine, which was built in 1855 and the subject of the great locomotive chase of the American Civil War. So a little history there. And those are the style trains that I like, I like the steam trains. So it was right away something that, I had a lot of interest in from a young age.
yeah, absolutely. Now, the general, as you mentioned, that's on display somewhere in Georgia now. Am I correct about that?
Kennesaw, Georgia,
Yes.
which is the hometown of Cincinnati Reds catcher Tyler Stevenson. There's the train museum there, and I remember when Tyler first joined the Reds, I sent a message to him through Twitter asking if he had ever been to the museum, and he replied back and said, "Yeah, yes, he had." So he became one of my favorite players because he seemed to be a train fan too.
That's fantastic. So the trains came in, they were much bigger than anticipated because if you look at like Coney Island's train was a chance ride little train, toy train. I don't want to say toy, but it wasn't what we have now. And then it came in obviously much larger. What is it, a one-third scale?
Yeah, it's a one third scale. Well, basically, what they call it is it's 36-inch gauge, more commonly known as narrow
Narrow
gauge.
gauge. Okay, cool. Now nowadays, most people know the train as transportation to the water park, as I mentioned before. When I was really little, I remember there being a show element to it, but I didn't get the whole thing. They ceased it before I was born. Tell me about the robbery and the scenes and stuff like that that they had before the water park was a thing.
Well, when it first opened, they had live actors
Hmm.
that were out along the course, and they would approach the train, and um, it was really really a good job of storytelling about what civilization and life would have been like back in the 1800s. Uh, some of the individuals that performed as actors there are well-known names. Dan Patrick, currently the host of NBC's The Dan Patrick Show, he was one of the actors on the train. Vicki Lewis, she made it famous on News Radio and How I Met Your Mother, Rugrats, Seinfeld, and Finding Nemo. She could be found working the train as a teenager back in the early 70s. But then, as you got to the later 70s, it was more focused on the animatronics, so the live actors were eliminated. But it was storytelling when you would go through and, um, talked about all the different things. And as you approached the town, I can still remember the voiceover, um, talking about it was common, back in the day for towns to have, um, the general store and combination physician, surgeon, dentist, undertaker, and but they would talk about the heart of the town was the railroad. That without it, the townspeople couldn't get the supplies they needed to survive. So there was that story component element of it that I always enjoyed. I knew that voiceover soundtrack by heart. Uh, my friend and I would always we would write it, we would call something out, maybe like, "Oh, what's going on over there at the fort?" And they would say, "You might be interested to know," and they would talk about the fort or something like
Yeah.
that, or "Why is that hanging so high?" And they would say, "Well, they hang it high enough so the animals couldn't get to it." So we always kind of had fun with it that way too. And but I just love it, still do, and I think it's great for transportation to Soak City Water Park. I'm one of those people when I go as a guest. I just sit on the train and wait till it takes off again. But very popular attraction, and like I mentioned, for a lot of kids, it's their first big ride. You look at uh, events like Coaster Stock, and you have those opportunities behind the scenes or video photo opportunities, with the train, and they absolutely love it. So it really appeals to guests of all ages. You don't have to be a train fan, but you're still somewhat fascinated with how it all works. And it is a real authentic steam engine. So where do there's not many places you can go to hop on a steam train. It is propane fired rather than wood. But the boilers and everything, it makes it real authentic steam spitting engines.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that my first visit in 90 or 91, I'm still trying to figure out when that was. They still had, I don't know if it was the pioneers, the Indians, or the cowboys were still shooting each other. They had the sound of gunfire. Gone the next year, I think. Um, Primarily transportation to the water park now, but for the Kings Island's 50th anniversary in 2022, the train got a little bit of a refurb, and actually some new elements to it. So let's talk about that. How did that decision come up? What was that like?
Well, I think when if you wrote it, in the past, before the 50th anniversary, but if you wrote it, from anywhere from like 2015 to 21, the buildings, were not looking to be in great shape.
Mhm.
A lot of the props and things had either been, removed or were, in bad condition. So they took that part of the experience, going through the town and really dressed that up nicely. They repainted the buildings. They brought out some props. There's a big
I
horse
love
now
the
that's
horse.
out there. You got people sitting on the porch. You got people in the jail. So it was really, really well done. And then before you even get to that point, before you get to the water park, they added around the little part of water, there's like the beaver family that's out there.
Mhm.
So I think that's nice to see that they put some love into the ride, and it's got something to look at now when you're riding. It's not just transportation to the water park. There is a little bit of scenery to see now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's obviously Teddy the bear.
Teddy the Bear, yes.
I think they got a new one if I'm not mistaken, but
That's a new one. Yeah, that was all part of the, bringing in the different things. You started with the town, then the beaver family came, and then the new bear came.
yeah, so yeah, all the animals moved in. The original teddy bear Was that original to the ride, or is that something they put in later?
That was not really, I don't, not in that spot, it wasn't original to the
Mhm.
ride, but it was something that was just kind of, put out there as a prop. It was something for the people that, work on the train, to kinda point out to,
Hmm.
make some jokes about.
Make some jokes about. That's what we need to do is give those engineers more fuel to make dad jokes. Awesome. Yeah, so the train, obviously, if you wanna pay tribute to Don Helbig at Kings Island or you're any local park, ride the train because he's there in spirit with you. Don, any final thoughts about the
Yeah.
train? I'm sure you could go on for hours, but I only have so much hard drive space.
No, I mean, I think it's kind of a throwback, attraction. It kinda tells you what, life would have been about in the 1800s. It's a ride through time in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. Uh, I think everybody loves the big roller coasters, and if you've got young kids, you love Planet Snoopy. I think this is an attraction, though. Just if you're not going to the water park, you just want to relax. Maybe you just had a meal, at the Miami, River Brew House. Just walk over. It's only a few feet away, and just hop on the train and take a nice, relaxing journey, around the track.
We love that train. So fun. Honestly, it's so relaxing. Even if the park's bit like for many of you probably are pass holders, so you go whether it's busy or not, if it's a Saturday or if it's Tuesday. If it's a busy day and you want to ride something relaxing, or you want to do something chill, boy, is the train the ride for you. That's my favorite part of it, really. Very accessible. All right. So I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.